Hello students, we have completed in our first video about force and its unit, different types of effect of force, then magnitude of force. In classification of forces, we discuss about non-contact force, and in non-contact force we covered magnetic force, electrostatic force and gravitational force. Now in this video we'll be discussing about contact force, that is muscular and frictional force, advantages and disadvantages of frictional force. Contact forces. Students, some of the forces acting on the objects are in contact with the object. That type of forces are known as contact force. Students, in the picture you can see that the boy is applying force on the trolley with his hands, and hands are in contact with the trolley and force is being applied. So such type of forces are known as contact forces. So what is the definition? The forces that act on objects by direct or indirect physical contact are known as contact forces. For example, frictional force, applied forces. Applied forces is also known as muscular forces, are the examples of contact force. Applied force, or you can say muscular force, both are same. So what is it? The forces that we apply with our hands, legs, fingers, etc. are collectively called as applied force. तो मस्कुलर फोर्स या तो अप्लाइड फोर्स क्या है? जो फोर्सेस हम हमारे हाथ, लेग्स, फिंगर्स के द्वारा अप्लाई करते हैं, उस टाइप के फोर्सेस को हम अप्लाइड फोर्स या तो मस्कुलर फोर्स कहते हैं. जब हम ये फोर्स अप्लाई करते हैं या तो कोई भी ऑब्जेक्ट को पुश या तो पुल करने के टाइम पे, तो ब्रेन जो है वो मसल्स को सिग्नल प्रोवाइड करती है और उसकी वजह से मसल्स या तो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट या तो एक्सपांड होते हैं और काम करते हैं. सो व्हाट इज अप्लाइड फोर्स? The forces that we apply with our hands, legs, fingers are known as applied forces. Friction. Friction is also a type of contact force. So what is it? Friction is a force that opposes resistance when two surfaces in contact move or try to move with respect to each other. So ये फ्रिक्शन क्या करता है? ये फ्रिक्शन जो है ये कोई भी मूविंग ऑब्जेक्ट जो है उसको अपोज करता है, उसके मोशन को अपोज करता है, उसे हम फ्रिक्शन कहते हैं. तो जब भी कोई भी ऑब्जेक्ट मूव करता है तो ये फ्रिक्शनल फोर्स ऑपोजिट डायरेक्शन में एक्ट करता है और वो ऑब्जेक्ट की मूवमेंट को स्टॉप करने की कोशिश करता है. सो ये टाइप के फोर्स को हम फ्रिक्शन कहते हैं. सो फ्रिक्शन अपोजेस द मोशन ऑफ एन ऑब्जेक्ट. इट एक्ट्स बिटवीन टू सरफेस इन कॉन्टैक्ट दैट स्लाइड्स और टेंड टू स्लाइड ओवर वन अनदर. फ्रिक्शन कैन ऑल्सो बी डिफाइंड एज resistance to the motion experienced when two surfaces in contact move with respect to each other. ये फ्रिक्शन जो है हमारे को बहुत काम आता है हमारी डे टू डे लाइफ में. जैसे हम पेन लिखने के लिए यूज़ करते हैं तो फ्रिक्शनल फोर्स जो है इट हेल्प्स इन राइटिंग ऑन अ पेपर. वी आर एबल टू वॉक or run because of the friction. Brushing the teeth is also the day-to-day activity where the friction is helping us. So what is it? Friction is a force that offers resistance when two surfaces in contact move or try to move with respect to each other. And this frictional force is helpful in walking, writing, movement of vehicles, etc. Now, let us see the factors that affect friction. Frictional force depend upon the following two main factors. The first one, mass of an object. Second, the nature of the surfaces in contact. The first one, mass of the object. Heavier the object, greater will be the frictional force. Lighter object will have less frictional force. Second one, nature of surfaces in contact. In general, a surface will offer a greater frictional force than the smooth surface. तो जो भी ऑब्जेक्ट का रफ सरफेस होगा तो उसका फ्रिक्शनल फोर्स ज़्यादा होगा इन कंपेयर टू द ऑब्जेक्ट हैविंग स्मूथ सरफेस. Now let us see an activity to prove that heavier objects have greater frictional force and rough surface will offer greater frictional force in compared to smooth surface.
That's placed on the table. We know that if we are pushing the cube in this direction, then the force of friction will act in the opposite direction. If we apply a force along the left, then the force of friction will act towards the right and vice versa. The force of friction will always oppose the applied force. What are the factors that affect the friction? Let me give you three situations and then you tell me what it depends on. The first situation is when an object with a smooth surface is moving on a surface which is very smooth. Second, in which the object has a smooth surface and the surface on which it moves is rough. Or the object has a rough surface and the surface on which it moves is smooth. And in the third case, the surface of the object as well as the surface of the table is rough. In which situation do you think will the force of friction be the highest? Intuitively, you will tell me that in the third case, the force of friction will be higher than these two cases. And in which situation will the force of friction be the lowest? It'll be the first case as both the surfaces are very smooth. Though there will be friction here, it will be lesser than that in the other two cases. If we just look at these three situations, we can say that the force of friction increases as we go towards the right. So can you tell me the first factor on which the force of friction depends? Yes, it depends on the nature of the surface on which the object moves and the nature of the surface of the object. Yes, it depends on the smoothness or the roughness of the two surfaces which are in contact with each other. If you want to find out if this is true, here's what you can do at home. Create an inclined slope on a table like this and mark a point somewhere on it. Now from this point, let a small cylindrical shaped object move down. You will see that it reaches a particular point and then stops. Next, place sandpaper right under the slope and leave the object from the same point as before. What do you notice? You will see that the distance covered by the object is lesser in the second case. And you probably know why. The surface on which the object rolled was rougher in the second case. And clearly, the force of friction was more. Why is friction caused though? It is caused due to the irregularities on the two surfaces in contact. What do I mean by irregularities? Now, even though the table looks smooth, if we zoom into the surface, we will see the surface irregularities. Even the surface of the object has irregularities. Though they are minor, they still exist. Now, the irregularities on the surfaces lock into one another. So whenever we have to move an object, we need to overcome the irregularities. But why is the friction higher on rough surfaces? It's because rougher the surfaces, more will be the irregularities. And if the irregularities are more, then more force will be required to overcome them. So the first factor affecting the friction is the nature of surfaces. Is there any other factor you can think of? Let's say there are two bricks on a table. One weighs 2 kilograms and the other weighs 5 kilograms. Now I apply equal force on them towards the right. Which brick do you think will go further? Remember that they are both kept on the same surface, and the surfaces of the bricks are also the same. On applying the same amount of force, you will notice that the lighter brick covered more distance than the heavier one. What does this tell us? It tells us that the friction also depends on the force with which the two surfaces are pressed together. If the two surfaces are pressed harder, the friction will be more. Why is that? Because of the second brick's greater weight, it presses on the table with greater force. Since its surface and the table surface are pressed together harder, the interlocking between the irregularities is more. And this results in more friction. So mainly, there are two things on which the force of friction depends: the nature of both surfaces and the force with which the two surfaces are pressed together.
Sliding friction. The frictional force offered when sliding an object is called sliding friction. जो फ्रिक्शनल फोर्स प्रोड्यूस होता है जब हम एक ऑब्जेक्ट को दूसरे सरफेस पे स्लाइड करते हैं, उस टाइप के फ्रिक्शन को हम स्लाइडिंग फ्रिक्शन कहते हैं. फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल, अगर हम बॉक्स को स्लाइड करवाएंगे तो वो कौन सा फ्रिक्शन होगा? तो स्लाइडिंग फ्रिक्शन. दूसरा, स्लाइडिंग फ्रिक्शन जो है वो किसके ऊपर डिपेंड करता है? ऑब्जेक्ट और उसके वेट पे. बट वो कौन से सरफेस पे स्लाइड हो रहा है इसके ऊपर डिपेंड नहीं हो रहा. सो स्लाइडिंग फ्रिक्शन डिपेंड्स अपॉन द मटीरियल ऑफ द ऑब्जेक्ट and their weight, but it does not depend upon the surface area. So this is the thing on which sliding friction depends. Now once again, what is sliding friction? The frictional force offered when sliding an object is known as sliding friction. Rolling friction. The frictional force offered when rolling an object is called rolling friction. For example, a ball rolling on a surface. Rolling friction क्या है? जब कोई ऑब्जेक्ट रोल करता है सरफेस पे तो वो फ्रिक्शन जो प्रोड्यूस होता है उसे हम रोलिंग फ्रिक्शन कहते हैं. और in compared to sliding friction, rolling friction is least. So it is the weakest type of force, and it is a force resisting the motion of a ball rolling or a wheel rolling on the surface. So what is it? The frictional force offered when rolling an object is known as rolling friction. कोई भी ऑब्जेक्ट पानी या तो एयर में मूव करते हैं तो वो एक रेजिस्टिव फोर्स जो है एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, और ये रेजिस्टिव फोर्स जो है उसे हम फ्लूइड फ्रिक्शन कहते हैं. और जब ये एयर में मूव करते हैं और रेजिस्टिव फोर्स एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं तो उसे हम ड्रैग कहते हैं. जैसे शिप पानी में मूव कर रही है, एरोप्लेन एयर में मूव कर रहा है, तो वो रेजिस्टिव फोर्स एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, और ये रेजिस्टिव फोर्स को हम फ्लूइड फ्रिक्शन कहते हैं. सो व्हेन एन ऑब्जेक्ट मूव्स इन फ्लूइड, it experiences a force that tends to slow down it. This resistive force is called as drag. तो जब कोई ऑब्जेक्ट फ्लूइड में मूव करता है तो वो एक्सपीरियंस फोर्स करता है, और ये फोर्स उनकी स्पीड को कम करता है, और ये रेजिस्टिव फोर्स को हम ड्रैग कहते हैं या तो फ्लूइड फ्रिक्शन कहते हैं. To reduce the drag automobiles, ships, aeroplanes are given a special shape called streamline shape. ये एक्सपीरियंस कम करे क्या तो कि फोर्स उसकी वजह से एरोप्लेन शिप उनको एक अलग सा स्पेशल शेप देते हैं और उस शेप को हम स्ट्रीमलाइन शेप कहते हैं. सो व्हाट इज इट? द एयर, वाटर एंड अदर फ्लूइड resist the motion of a object due to friction. This frictional force due to air, water and other fluid is called fluid friction. Advantages of friction. Students, friction is very useful in our daily life. Without friction, we cannot imagine our day-to-day small activities also. Without friction, we would not been able to hold on anything. Objects would slide and slip away from each other if there is no friction. It is because of the friction we are able to walk, we are able to write on the notebook or on the blackboard, opening of door, closing of door, turning off the tap, water tap also. All these things are possible because of the friction. Even the bed sheet on the bed remains intact because of the friction. We can sit on chair without sliding off because of the friction. So, writing, walking, turning on tap, opening door, all these things, small things are possible because of the friction. Friction even slow downs or stop the moving object. If the friction force is not there, the things will keep on moving on and on. They will not come to stand still. So these are advantages of friction. Are they? Writing, walking, opening door, turning off tap, burning off matchstick is all possible because of the friction. Although the frictional force is very useful, but there are some disadvantages also. So, let us see the disadvantages of friction. The first one, friction produces heat. Second, friction also causes wear and tear. Third, it causes moving object to slow down unnecessarily. So, let us discuss them in detail. Friction produces heat. This friction produces heat that causes the moving part of machines and automobiles to overheat. As a result, there is a wastage of energy and fuel. Second one, friction also causes wear and tear. For example, tires of vehicles wear out due to frictional force between the tires and the road. The wear out tires can cause road accident. The last one, it also causes moving object to slow down unnecessarily. For example, friction between boat and the water surface slow down the boat. These are the few disadvantages of friction. Now, let us discuss ways to reduce frictional forces. What are they? First one, apply a lubricant to make surface smoother. Second, use of ball bearing. And third, use of wheels. First, apply a lubricant to make surface smoother. So, what is lubricant? A lubricant is a substance that makes the surface smooth on which it is applied, and this process is known as lubrication. Oil and grease are lubricants. We can apply oil or grease on the moving part of machines to reduce the friction between the parts. Second one, use of ball bearing. A ball bearing is a type of rolling element bearing that uses ball to maintain separation between the bearing races. Ball bearing changes sliding friction into rolling friction. And students, we have already discussed that rolling friction is very less in compared to sliding friction. So, rolling friction is less than sliding friction. The friction is reduced and the motion becomes more feasible. The third one, use of wheels. A wheel reduces friction by allowing the contacting surface to roll rather than to drag or slide over each other. By reducing friction, a wheel can enable us to use less force to move the object. So, these are some of the ways by which we can reduce frictional force. Which are they? By applying a lubricant to make the surface smoother, use of ball bearing, and use of wheels. We have just discussed how to reduce friction. Now we will discuss the different ways to increase friction. So which are they? First, by making the surface rough. Second, by increasing the weight of moving object. So, the first one, by making the surface rough. Special designs or threads are made on the tires of the vehicle so to increase the friction between tire and the road so that they do not skid while traveling. And the second one, by increasing the weight of moving object. If the object which is moving on the surface is made heavy, the friction can be increased. So these are the two ways by which we can increase friction. First one, by making the surface rough. Second, by increasing the weight of moving object. Students, in this video, we discussed about contact force, then muscular or you can say applied force, then we discuss about friction, factors on which the friction depends, then we discuss about sliding and rolling friction, then we discuss about the advantages and disadvantages of friction, that how friction is useful as well as harmful, and in the last we discuss the different ways to increase and decrease the friction. Hope the concepts are clear. Students, keep on learning, utilize your time and stay safe.